So greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Drupal 11 migration tips, tricks, and lessons learned. I have way too many cats in my home right now, and so I decided to put a bunch of them on the slides. Also, because we tend to get bored at watching slides after slide. So, and this is our newest kitten, who is very, very active. It'll come back. Okay. So again, my name is Michael Brewer. I work for the Franklin College Office of Information Technology at the University of Georgia. That's in Athens, Georgia. I am a web developer principal. I've been doing this for about 14 or 15 years. I literally don't remember when we migrated to Drupal. And I've been working in the field for about a quarter of a century, sadly. And I am also a member of the U.S. PostgreSQL Association. So if you want to talk Postgres, I will talk Postgres at you. So at the Franklin College Office of Information Technology, I want to say it's 134 because that's why I didn't type 135 on my slide. Of over 130 Drupal sites for colleges, departments, centers, institutes, research labs, the Rogue Horn Studio, and all kinds of sites. We host this on Pantheon, which is going to be a recurring theme. Most of what I talk about will be in the context of hosting on Pantheon. That being said, this is not a recommendation. UGA does not recommend anything. I have no recommendations to give. The University of Georgia has no official policy on any of this. This is just a description of what we do, how we did it, and what worked for us in our situation. Your miles may vary. It's like that. Let me talk a little bit about Pantheon, just because this will give you some context, not a recommendation, some context as to what we're dealing with in terms of our site hosting. How many of y'all do self-hosting?
For other stuff, yeah.
Yeah, but not for Drupal? Mostly Amazon. How many of you manage an Amazon Cloud instance by yourselves? Okay. We used to host our Drupal websites ourselves back when there were only about 70 or 80 of them. And we were motivated to let Pantheon take care of most of this for us. They allow us to use a custom upstream so that we have a common code base across basically 133 of the 134 websites. Sorry, 132 of the 134 websites. They have a good administrative dashboard. They have good command line tools so that we can use Drush. They have a tool called Terminus that they use to run Drush commands against the servers. That we can also, if we needed to, run SQL commands, that kind of stuff. But I'm old enough to be a person that likes using the command line and writing bash scripts whenever I can. So highly recommend hosting that allows you to use command line tools. They support a local development environment. To be honest with you, they used Lando for a while. I'm not sure if they still use Lando because honestly, I've stopped using local development because most of my challenges are, can I get the code base to work on my server? And usually the problem points come in the transition between local dev and the hosting for how I've been doing it, which is supposed to go completely against why you use a local development environment to begin with. But we've had enough fun with Lando to where that's just what we do. I do recommend, when possible, using a local development environment because sometimes things will work faster for you. It's just the type of development I use things for. I just haven't had to go in and beat on things with a hammer in that aspect, where an LDE works best for me. They also have pretty good customer support because as y'all who've been working with Amazon know, containers, we love them, but sometimes they fail. And boy, there is nothing quite as fun as going, why is my SQL server suddenly not talking to my website? It's probably the container. time to get out the container overalls and go to work here. So this, from our perspective, from our context, is what Pantheon has done well for us. So let's talk a little bit more about upgraded Drupal 11. More caveats. This is the process that we used. I do not feel that there is one true method. This is just our method. This is the method that we used. This was our smoothest upgrade by far once we escaped the composer maelstrom. This and Pantheon server architecture actually helped us when we're doing this, because Pantheon allowed us to easily spin up Drupal 11 platforms as separate Git branches for each of the sites that we were doing, so that we could, and we were able to, in how they create environments, they allow you to copy the files and database directly, which was easier than importing it, because whenever we imported it, we would run into weird git ignore features and so cloning the environments wound up working, or I suspect they use rsync, but yeah, I don't know what Pantheon does, but whatever that process was worked slightly better for us than copying databases and files across the wire, and so this worked well for us. But yes, by far, our smoothest upgrade. Most of y'all remember, I think it's the 7 to 8 update that just made you question why you were in this business to begin with. This is not that. It's also not the 9 to 10 upgrade. The 9 to 10 upgrade was weird, and it took us a while, right? It kind of took us a while. But once we kind of figured it out, it sort of worked for a while. This is better than that, I would say. It's a better upgrade thing. It's different, but better. It's a process, your mileage may vary, and also, we're still shaking out bugs ourselves. I literally, last week, after making up a slide deck and stuff like that, we found one module where we couldn't hit the config page without white screening out. And we're like, really? Really? This didn't turn up in any of our testing. None of our users thought to complain that they didn't have this functionality for the month and a half to 2 months that we've been running live on this. So, anyway, the key to this upgrade is the preparation that you do beforehand. Obviously, make sure to use the upgrade status tool. If you haven't used upgrade status before, upgrade status is a web page off of your admin. It's a module that you enable, and once enabled, it'll give you off of your, I want to say the same place that you go for your status and your logs. You have a little link that'll take you to upgrade status, and it'll show you what your server architecture looks like in terms of supporting Drupal 11. Is your database up to date? Is your PHP up to date? Is your composer version up to date? Is your version of Drush up to date? It'll also go through all of your theme files and say if they're compatible or not compatible. It'll go through your modules and tell you if your modules are compatible, incompatible with the upgrade. If they are incompatible currently, is there a Drupal 11 version of this module, or is there not a Drupal 11 version of this module? Upgrade status takes you through all of that. It's very important for server support. This is going to get you close to what you want. The problem that we run into on Drupal is a familiar one to you, where maintainers aren't always the most prompt people at updating those modules to Drupal 11 versions, right? And so you're probably going to get to a point where you start doing the math and say, how many months do I have until this is ready to go? Or until my boss is telling me that we've got to do this, and how many modules do I have left? Modules and months, and you'll be doing this math for a while. And so finally you'll just be like, we're close enough. The maintainers are obviously not going to do anything about this, so we need to go. Upgrade process. Always remember to brush and floss. You need to back up your servers before any changes. Then you need to back them up again because you may have forgotten how to do it that first time. Make a list of the modules currently enabled on your sites. Here, if you have access to command line Drush, this is where you do your PML, Drush PML, list all my modules. You'll probably want to make sure that you list the enabled ones, because hopefully those are the ones that you care about. Do a Drush PML, generate a list of all those. If you're going to remove any modules, back up the sites first. Please, back up the sites first. Back up the sites first, because you're going to forget to back up your sites. Back up your sites first, then remove them before you do the update. We have documented rules that say back up before you update, back up before you remove a module, stuff like that. And still, people will remove modules before they do that. So we're all human. I understand that, but I'm telling you, you're going to want to do this before your update. How many of y'all use CAS authentication on your websites? One there. Okay, if you use CAS authentication on your website, there's a difference in the version of CAS between the new version that supports 11 and the old version. And you've probably seen this, but in case you haven't, the newest CAS version will not update. Will not authenticate on your website. You'll break authentication on your website if you go to the newest version of CAS. The way to solve that is to set a default timeout in the advanced settings. That's all you have to do. You can bash script it through Drush and have a bunch, which is what we did to set for everybody's. But you need to set that CAS setting, because if you don't, you've just broken stuff, and you'll be like, this one little thing took us forever to diagnose.
Thanks, you just saved me forever.
Yeah. It's because it didn't break on everything up until the newest version, and it will not work. It will not work, and it will fail badly if you try it on the new. Okay, so now you're ready to begin your update. Back up the sites again. And the other thing is, you really need to test your ability to restore a site from backup. Again, our server context is Pantheon. Pantheon has kind of single-click functionality for restoring from backup, which you still need to check, even though it's just though it's a single click, because you'll discover things like, when I restore from backup on a Pantheon site, it's using the git ignore and not some kind of rsync, which means that your hidden your .private folder your .ht access gets overwritten, and you might not want your .ht access to get overwritten, and so just little things like that. You need to test it before you run it. Now you're really ready to start. Now, Pantheon has documentation for how to upgrade. Very extensive, very nice pages. This documentation led us to Composer Maelstrom. Composer Maelstrom here I define as you're like, I'm ready to go. I've got Pantheon has given me the incantation to plug into my command line to update this thing. Hit Composer upgrade with dependencies, force version 11, all this kind of stuff. Go, and Composer comes back with you. I can't do it because, and the because list is like 3 screens long, and about half of those screens all talk about things that you thought you were doing when you updated the code to begin with. You can't do it because you need version 11. That's what I'm going for, is version 11. And Composer Maelstrom will drive you insane. Drupal, fortunately, has documentation for how to upgrade, which is slightly different than the Pantheon. So we tried this. It also led us to Composer Maelstrom zone. You want to avoid Composer Maelstrom as long as possible, because it will just make your life a living hell. So the only thing that worked for us, Pantheon had a blank Drupal 11 template. Create a Drupal 10 site from backup. And it wasn't our custom upstream, and we were like, why would I just create a blank Drupal site? We used this as a template. So we created a blank Drupal 11 website. Then we used their code download, their git download, to download that git repo to a local folder. And we used that as the template. Now, because Git is Git, you can't just copy stuff over, right? You have to delete from your old site or from your new site. You have to delete before you move things over, or else Google is going to try to merge it over ever so helpfully, try to merge things. You want a clean delete. We kept the .git folder, we kept the .git attributes and the .git ignore, and we nuked everything else. We nuked everything that was a .md, even though those are just README files. We killed them anyway because we don't want them to merge those. Kill your star.yaml. Kill composer.star. Kill everything and take it, strip it down to bare wire. You have a folder with a Git archive in it, and then you copy over the new blank sites, MDs, YAMLs, composer.style, the config directory, the patches directory, the recipes directory. I'm going to hit this button while I'm thinking about it. The upstream configuration directory and the web directory. If you might go, recipes, what's that? Yeah, Drupal 11 has a recipes directory that you're going to need to copy over. It's one of the various changes to the website. And once you've done this, that gives you something that lets you say Composer upgrade, and Composer upgrade is going to work because there's nothing there. And then you take that list of modules and you go through them one by one. Sorry, but anything else is probably going to lead you to Composer Maelstrom, because there are going to be 3 to 5 modules in there that aren't going to behave, maybe more. We only have, I don't know, 50 odd modules on our website. Some people have hundreds. You have to go to those project pages, and you scroll to the bottom. You copy that Composer script that they have down there. You plug it in and go. This is what's going to tell you. Some of these modules are going to fail. Some of the project pages are going to not have Drupal 11 things. Flex Slider, for example, just barely had a Drupal 10 version, barely, and that was fun to get working, but we did. But you're just going to have to go through this iterative process until you get, at every step, a working Drupal 11 site that Composer update will work with. If you remember the 9 to 10 update, the 9 to 10 update, Composer didn't give you nearly as much trouble as it does now. With Drupal 11, Composer is really picky. It will not let you slide on installing modules that maybe kind of sort of work. It will not. The key here is that Drupal 11 is kind of casual about how it thinks something will work, and I'll show you that in just a second. So make your list of modules that fail. Note them down. Make the list of the ones that fail, but get yourself a working Drupal 11 site. What about those missing modules? You're going to have to patch them to get them to work on Drupal 11, or give up on them, of course. But you probably don't want to give up on them. And even though there are, as you know, there's always more than one module to do a certain task, usually. Still, users like comfort and familiarity. They want to work with what they've seen and what they've used before. So you have two basic, at least, and we had two basic choices when we were patching modules. You can either write patch files that Composer can manage for you. You put them in a patches directory, or you can name them, something other than patches if you want to be cute. But we put them in a patches directory, and we reference them from composer.json. Or you can Amber them, put them in Amber. You update the module file, and you put them outside the composer managed directory. I think it's contrib in Drupal 11, but honestly it's whatever you define it to be in your various configuration files, right? But you put them in web modules outside of the composer managed things, and you bake them in Amber, and you fix them, and then you don't change them. Because Drupal 11 doesn't care, just like Drupal 10 didn't care, right? It didn't care if that module code was in its own directory or if it's in I think it was Web Modules Composer was the Drupal 10 way of doing it, and of course we changed the directory name because we like changing things. And you've probably all had the experience at one point or another where you're like, I updated this module. Why does the extend page tell me that I'm running an older version of this module? And you're like, what is? You curse the gods. You rend your garments, and eventually you look at your repo and you discover that you had an extra copy of this module hanging out somewhere where it wasn't composer managed. Here, the Amber option is that you do this on purpose. Now, the positives for writing patch files, aside from just wandering around feeling good that you figured out how to write a patch file, because the syntax for patch files can be a little bit daunting if you haven't done that before. This will keep your module code up to date as much as possible. Specifically, Composer handles this installation for you. So, if and when the module maintainer updates the module for things that aren't related to this patch, that will be taken care of you at the next update. And you don't have to, you let Composer worry about that for you. This is really cool. And it's a nice way of doing it. The challenges from our perspective. Patch files can be tricky to write, both in terms of paths and in syntax. Generally speaking, how many of y'all have written how many of you are familiar with patch syntax, like running git patches or stuff like that? Okay, good. How many of you have written Composer patch files for your Drupal sites? Good, okay, so I don't have to tell you that, but speaking into the microphone for posterity, those paths are slightly different, right? When you're dealing with the git syntax, you have to get the relative path names correct, and some, your version may care if you have A and B in there, if your file names are A and B before that path name. Some of yours may not. Ours did, and so we had to pull those out and change the path. And at some point in this second slide says sometimes you can do multiple files, but sometimes you can't. We had multiple patch files, right? That patched multiple files. That worked for us until it didn't. And when it doesn't, then you're like, oh crap, what do I do? You write 5 patch files for the 5 files that need patching, and you call them in your composer.json consecutively. I don't know why. I at some point I didn't really care why. I just wanted it to work. So removing files can be tricky. Sending things to dev null. Some people are more comfortable with that than others. That can be a difficult thing. And the real fun part, if you're using Pantheon hosting, I assume this happens for other hosting providers, although I don't know this. If a module update breaks the patch, right? Usually you write a patch because you need it to do something that it doesn't already do. And then the module maintainer actually gets around to writing that into their code. That's going to break the patch file. If the patch file breaks, Pantheon's not going to let you apply it. And it's going to fail silently and just tell you, oh, something went wrong. And you get to figure out what the something that went wrong was. This is another plus for local development, because you running that Composer update locally will usually tell you that it's kind of the first debugging step if a Pantheon if a Pantheon patch fails to go and you believe it's not a server problem on Pantheon that happens from time to time, or a container issue on Pantheon, which happens from time to time, or an Ajax networking issue on the admin web page, which happens from time to time, that the reporting just gets lost in the TCP/IP mail somewhere. The first thing you do is you run composer update on you grab the Git repo, put it locally, run composer update, and see if it's a patch that failed, because that's usually what's going to happen, is that you had a patch that broke the build, and you're like, okay, let's fix that. And you might be like, okay, that sounds like fun. Let's put them in Amber. The positives of Amber: it's much easier to write and test because you're working with the module directories, locally. You're not running a patch file and then running composer update and running to see if it actually applied the patches to the right places and all that kind of stuff. You just write. You fix the problem. You fix the module yourself, and you don't have to ever worry that a composer install will fail silently and not work on you. It's going to work. The downside is a big downside. These clutter the repo a good bit, right? You're adding stuff to that repo. Depending on your hosting requirements, maybe, it's doubtful that will ever be a problem. But working with your own, how you work with your teams, how they look at code, they may not be able to figure out what you're doing here. You might have to modify git ignore rules in certain situations. We had to do this for library files. We had to tell our git ignore to ignore certain library directories but not others, because we needed the library files to install. And we didn't want to put the library in a weird place, so we just had to tell our git ignore thing. But the biggest problem is that your module code, because your module code never changes, you're going to now have to monitor that project for file updates and server updates. You'll need to check in every, however long you feel is appropriate, every week or two or month or two or year or two, check in on that module and say, okay, did they ever actually release a Drupal 11 patch for this? The most common patch that you're going to do, if you're writing patches and you want to get something to compile, is you're going to modify the module.info.yaml file, and you're going to pipe version 11 onto the core version requirement. That by far is the most takes care of the most installation issues. If you just want it to work and see what happens later, darn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. Composer will probably let you install it at this point, unless there are dependencies that continue to block it. But you'll usually find out about that. This also will let it pass on the status page, on the admin status page. It will no longer yell at you that you're using an unsupported version because, oh, your module says it's supported. This also works for your theme files. That's the simplest thing to do. It's your module, whatever your module is, the .info.yaml file, add 11 to your core version requirement. This is also by far the thing that will get broken if you're using composer patching. This is the first thing that someone will move and break and anything. Okay, now the fun part. Your modules will probably work better than you're expecting them to, especially if they have Drupal 10 versions. They will probably work, probably, more or less. You'll still want to visit the module project page on Drupal. You'll want to go to that issues for blank page and do a search for Drupal 11. Look at the entries for automated Drupal 11 compatibility fixes. If they don't have one, like Flex Slider didn't, you'll have to look at the Drupal 10 ones, but it's all good. Look at the patches that are there. Usually, in most cases, someone has done the work for you and made the module Drupal 11 compatible, and they're just waiting on a maintainer to let the the blankety blank patch request go through. It's in 9 cases out of 10, you're just waiting on a patch request to be approved, a merge request to be approved. And so you can use that patch bot. Sometimes you can go to the GitHub page for the module, and they'll have issues there, and they'll have a merge request there, and you can pull that from there. This also will inadvertently teach you much more than you want to know about the inner workings of Drupal, and what tends to fail. But there are only, in all the modules that we worked with, there were only about 3 things that broke on a thing. Usually it's some kind of typing. They didn't call the type. They've changed how they call the typer in the constructor, and you need to call it in this other way and make this other additional call. Or, this thing or this thing. There are usually about 3 things, which is why that's why your automated Drupal 11 compatibility fixes, that's why that bot works really, really well at updating them, because there really isn't a lot that has to be done to update these code. And like I said, go to the GitHub project page for the module. Likely that there will be issues and patches there. Apply those. The really good thing about the GitHub project page versions of these, that you may prefer them to people submitting patches in the repo, is usually the GitHub project, the syntax is a little easier for you to read and a little easier for you to copy, paste, and modify into what you're using for a Drupal patch code. Or you'll look at it and you'll go, I'm just going to make this in Amber, and I can make the changes because they're color coordinated. I know exactly where to go and exactly how to make this change, and you'll just zip right through it. Again, if nothing else, make sure you update that info.yaml file. This will help you, because if you update the info.yaml file and it goes through and you put it on your live website and it fails, you're actually really lucky that it fails, because you're going to get a log entry that's going to give you a very specific error code and a very specific, let me go and Google, don't Google the entire error, right? The entire error won't do you any good when you Google. Google all the way up to the path of your module, because generally speaking, modules are written the same way and they fail the same way. You're gonna, if it's a SQL exception error, or if it's the module, the constructor was expecting 2 items and only 1 was provided, it doesn't need to know what the module name is. It needs to know what the actual list is, and that's what's going to pop up your fix for you, that you can then implement as a patch or an Amber. Also, sometimes there are module solutions. This module at the bottom, jQuery_deprecated_functions. This is going to fix a lot of your issues. It's a patch kind of thing. It's not, yes, everybody starts moving. I told them something interesting. jQuery_deprecated_functions. If you have something that was depending on jQuery and it broke when they moved away from jQuery on Drupal, possibly even Drupal 10, but Drupal 11 moves away from whatever jQuery version that you're using, and whatever particular slider, be it Flex slider, be it some other carousel, you might have some kind of image carousel working that just suddenly stopped working. jQuery deprecated functions gives you that back. Don't know how long it's going to last? Don't care. This buys you time. These are the various modules that we have patched. Some of these you might find of interest, some of them are not. Block content permissions. Microsoft Clarity, that was relatively new. Yes, we patched CK Editor 4 so that it would stop yelling at us. And because we had users that didn't want to go to 5 for whatever reason, and so we didn't want it to yell at us, and so we patched it for them. Collapsible drag and drop. Color. The Facebook like box. Flex slider. That was a very long one. Both Linux, the 7 admin theme. I don't know how many of you still use 7 admin theme. You might as well just move to Clara because you can get it. You can get 7 to stop complaining to you, but it's not going to work. It'll fail in really quick and subtle ways that will just make you sad. Tag-light, tagadelic, tag clouds. We use a lot of tagging solutions over 15 years, and the video embed WYSIWYG. That one was a fun one because it's not a project, right? It's a sub module of video I'm trying to remember which module it was a sub module of, but it made it really tricky because you couldn't pull this as a module. We had to go to the old one, find the sub module, pull it out, stick it in Amber, and stick it on the website, and then the site stopped complaining to us. But this is a lot of patches, but the fun part is when everything works and your slide carousel that you told your users, I'm sorry, Drupal doesn't, I know you loved your slideshow in Drupal 9, but Drupal 10 just kind of subtly barely worked on Flex Slider. And so we actually told all our users they couldn't use Flex Slider. And then a colleague of mine put in the work and actually fixed Flex Slider for Drupal 11. No, we haven't pushed it back to the repo yet. They haven't really worked on their 10 version. Why would they care about our 11 version? But if you want to know about it, let me know afterwards at some point. And I can show, I might be able to walk you through some of that. What tips and tricks have y'all done? We wanted to make sure that this was inclusive. Are there upgrade tricks that y'all have used that you have found of use? Yes.
The Drupal Rector project is pretty helpful in that it can...
The automatic bot that shows you the automatic thing. Yeah.
It took care of a lot of our custom theme issues and module issues.
Yeah. It's I'm reading the tea leaves in the room. I don't know if Rector is AI enabled, but I'm pretty sure that at some point people are going to start just running AI against their module code bases and saying, "Hey, update my code. Hey, ChatGPT, update my code for me." That's coming for all of us, I would guess. But Rector is kind of a thing. Any other tips or?
What was that?
Rector?
I talked over you again, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Rector?
R-E-C-T-O-R.
Yes, it's a PHP project, but Ken Rickard and
Ken
Alan
Rickard.
kind of supported it
Yeah.
to Drupal, made it Drupal specific, and you kind of installed it. I forget if we installed it as a module or not, but you run that and it gives you a lot of suggestions and or fixes your code for you.
Yeah, and that's I think it's what the automatic compatibility checker does. I think it uses Rector to generate those patches, and most of the time it does a really good job, and it always teaches you something about PHP.
Yeah, upgrade status is especially helpful for you to run like in a local config split if you're using local development. Because you can keep up with, here's the things I need to worry about this month in preparation for this, down the road migration to the version.
I like how upgrade status also generates those for modules that have Drupal 11 versions. It lists them separately in like the first section. It says you have this module. You're not running the latest version of this module, but you can run this, and it links to the project page. And then beneath that, it has a list of modules that theoretically aren't Drupal 11 ready, and it links to the issue pages. It does that project search where all it does is it searches for the Drupal 11 string on the page via the query string, but it saves you a little bit of time, and it's pretty useful. I like that, yeah. Any other tips and tricks that y'all have used on your own upgrades?
It's kind of rhetorical, but I would say
Yeah.
just maintaining your site, keeping it up to date as best as you can, because whenever it does come time to update, you're not having to jump a whole lot of versions.
Right.
You're just going a small incremental version. And by doing that, a lot of times when it comes time to update, you're already ready. So like if you're on Drupal 10 going to 11, you have the most recent version, likely it has the whole, everything that you need to just jump right over.
Yeah. Sometimes it's we get lulled into that kind of false sense of security by Drupal.org, right? Where it's like, okay, it's the second Wednesday of the month or the third Thursday of the month. I'm not sure when, but you only look for the patches when you're expecting them to, and then you only run your updates for the modules at that time. And again, for posterity, Will is reminding us. Running update more often than that when you're not just updating core and keeping the other versions of the modules up is good. Although for me, I stopped doing that when Kaz broke hard, and I was like crap. But yeah. Usually the module updates don't completely break everything. But I guess that's the difference between the point releases and the
Major releases.
Yeah, and the major releases for modules too.
I found for the last 2 upgrades that it was really helpful to use. Well, we've got our repos in GitHub, so it was helpful to use a project that has a Kanban board that can link back to issues that you create in the repo that are like, upgrading XX module, upgrading this module, and then you can just start like documenting and linking to issues and things like that.
Marking them as fixed and
then it helps like your project manager to understand. Well, you told me you need to migrate from Drupal 9 to Drupal 10, and here's all the reasons why. And here's where we're at.
Mm-hmm. We're about to hit so that's that, and we're about to hit questions. But I do want to say, if you haven't done this migration yet, the one thing I want to say about it. There we go. The one thing I want to say about it is it's really not so bad this time, but you have to get your ducks in a row beforehand, and for us there was no path through the various through the Composer Maelstrom stuff. There was no path. We tried everything that you do in those instances where you're like, oh, let me look up the issue for this, and maybe someone somewhere will tell me how to fix that, and maybe they will, but it'll just lead you to another thing and stuff like that. Build from bare floor. Build up from a bare floor is what we did, and it made it the easiest it's ever been for us. So, does anyone else have any questions?
We have some clients that are on old versions of Drupal. Like, what if they have like a version 8 or something, and we want to get into 10 or 11? Do you go 8, 9, 10, 11, or do you jump? You can't jump.
You gotta look at the dates of everything.
So there was a talk. I'm sorry. There was a talk just an hour before. Well, hang on a second. I'll get the name. The Fear to Freedom: Mastering Drupal Updates and a Structured Approach.
Okay.
Look for it. It was mind blowing.
Perfect.
So, yeah.
So it's
using version control updates.
2 o'clock, right?
Yeah, it was last. 1
1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. Yeah. This isn't mind blowing. This is just practical.
I do have a question. You
Yeah.
said you use you custom upstream
Yeah.
and you don't do local development.
I have.
Well,
I just
so
am.
you're
I'm
gonna-
not right now. But
So
yes.
Are you taking a multi-dev and putting it in SFTP mode, and making the updates? Or are you making?
Yeah. Because our custom upstream is pretty stable, and because we tore everything out and built up from it, it really just kind of worked for us. When things didn't work, That's like Flex Slider. My colleague did a lot of local dev work on Flex Slider to get it to work.
I was saying, like, moving forward though, I mean, do you make the updates in a multi-dev and then use like something like Quicksilver to push it back?
It depends on what the update. It depends on what the update is.
Because your custom upstream is the record of ownership, right? That's your.
Yeah.
That's.
But Pantheon also has 3 server environments, right? It has a dev, a test, and production.
Yeah, but test and live are tags master.
Sure.
Right?
But yeah, for the Drupal 11 update, we did do a multi-dev instance where we did all our work on 11. But then because we're a little cautious about how we use Git, we actually did. We replicated the migration on our test on the dev environment. We didn't merge it. We re-implemented.
Okay.
Because Git merging is a black art,
Baby steps. Baby steps.
Yeah. Well, and also honestly, we wanted the practice. Wanted them to see what goes into doing this, and to remind them of remind the coworkers of this is the procedure that we're using, and so there was a little bit of we want to make them we want to make them walk through the field and see how this works.
So you're not using any like CI/CD for testing?
No, we don't. I think it's great. We don't use it. But no, I think test suites. It would have saved us a lot of time. It would have saved us a lot of hassle when we found out a month and a half after deploying that there was a feature of the website that just wasn't working, that no one had thought to test because it was buried somewhere, 3 levels deep in a brochureware kind of thing, and just no one thought to report it to us. And we didn't see it in testing because we didn't use a full testing suite. Yeah. And also because sometimes and good testing is a subject of its own lecture. A lot of times with Drupal 11, you'll have a functioning module that works, but it'll either generate log entries that will make you uncomfortable, that you'll eventually want to solve even though the site is working, scare quote working, or either the config or the permissions pages on the admin won't work. They'll white screen for you, and you won't know why. And again, spoiler alert, it's in the constructor. It's almost always the constructor that's the problem because they changed how the constructor worked. But sometimes your testing suites won't get that if you're not testing your admin side. You always have to test both the admin side and the user side, and sometimes people prioritize the general user side because it's the general user thing, and they figure that admins can just kind of deal with stuff. But no, you'll want to look at that and work on it.
So you guys are way ahead of end of life. What's the end of life date?
Of 11? I don't know, but
what's the end of life date for 10?
10 end of life is December, isn't it?
December 2026 or 10.5.
Something like that. I for some reason I thought it was closer. They're already, of course, you can already test on 12. We haven't yet. We just wanted to get to, I think at some point, like last year, I want to say that last year it was this December, and it may have gotten pushed forward this year, but we'd already committed to the upgrade cycle before it got pushed. And I mean, 11's working fairly well, aside from the things that break, it works great. No, it's working. Yes.
It's not a question, but it's more kind of like the previous slide with the tips and other things. So kind of speaking to the Composer Maelstrom, which I really like, that,
Yeah.
by the way. one thing that, and I've been with Drupal, working with Drupal for a very long time, and usually when I'm doing things like updating core or updating a module, I'm usually doing it one by one.
Right.
And that was something that I noticed going from 10 to 11 was that, Composer required about Drush. You need Drush 13. Well, in order to get Drush 13, you need Drupal 11. Great. I'm with Drupal 11. We need Drush 13. So it's like, it's this, but you can update two at the same time. So like being able to specify the versions and update them in a group. That, it might be rhetorical for some, but like that was something that once I realized that I could do that, like upgrade multiple things at once, so they were complaining about each other about the compatibilities. It helped solve a lot of that maelstrom for me.
Yeah, and that's what, and I think that's what helped us in terms of finally realizing that Pantheon had done some of that work for us, and
blow away a log file, the vendor file, and just reinstall it.
It's something, yeah. I mean, and they gave us a Git repo that worked, and it's usually conflicting YAML files, project YAML files somewhere. Some YAML file somewhere is arguing with some other YAML file, and we're left to try to sort it out. It was, this was a long, the actual upgrade was short compared to trying to upgrade, which was long. Because we kept running into Composer Maelstrom. And it's even read in the command line. It's like it's just terrible. But find a blank working repo. Usually your hosting provider has something that can go, but don't reinvent the wheel, because there was not a direct path, upgrade path, despite it being documented. The documentation was great, and we had used the documentation when we went from 9 to 10. That documentation worked. But that was when Composer wasn't complaining about Drush, and Drush complaining about Composer, and everything complaining about this other random thing over here that you're like, this isn't related at all. And yeah, you're like, what is this module? What does this have to do with it? And we started over, and it worked wonders for us. But it required us to shift our thinking, because as coders, we tend to be like, we just tend to be going straight ahead, straight line, and it took beating a head against the wall for a few weeks, maybe a month and a half, to finally go, let's step around the wall, and do it that way. And I wish I could, I wish there was a magical incantation in the slide thing that gets you, there wasn't one for us, because every incantation led to the same place, and you don't want to go to the maelstrom.
If nothing else, this gives us a great reset point for anything that breaks.
Yeah.
Anything thoroughly breaks, we have a nuclear option.
Yeah. Any other questions? I know we've gone a little long here. Sorry.
No worries.
Good, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Contact information. You can see more cats on my Instagram. There's a LinkedIn profile that I never update. But please, hold on.